Welcome once again to the Brownstone, Wolfe's sanctuary of logic, orchids, and murder. Do tell us where in the world you're listening from, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts. If you enjoy these cases, consider liking and subscribing. Now then, shall we begin? Every good mystery deserves good company, and a little gratitude between cases. A warm thank you to Norma, our newest patron. Your support keeps the orchids blooming and the mysteries alive. Join the circle of mystery lovers on Patreon. Link in description. Nero Wolfe and the Visitor. Archie shouldn't have trusted. It was one of those afternoons when the air in Wolfe's office felt like it had been filtered through a slow-moving river of gravy. The roast was still in Fritz's jurisdiction downstairs. The orchids were safe and smug upstairs. And Wolfe was giving his chair the kind of devotion other men reserve for religion. My own occupation was less spiritual, sorting bills, frowning at numbers, and trying to decide whether we could afford a new typewriter ribbon without mortgaging the brownstone. That's when the doorbell rang. Now, interruptions at that hour rank just below termites in Wolfe's scale of acceptable events. He'd finished lunch 20 minutes earlier and was deep in his post-meal trance, eyes half closed, fingers tented. The bell cut through it like a slap. I glanced at him. He didn't move. That was standard. When I said, "Someone at the door," he murmured, "Pfui," without opening his eyes. That was also standard. So I went. The woman standing on the stoop looked as if she'd taken a wrong turn out of a magazine cover. The canary-yellow hat perched on her head was cheerful enough to light Broadway, but the eyes under its brim were grey and stormy. Her gloves matched her handbag. Her perfume carried a trace of gardenia and the kind of trouble that grows in penthouses. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, as if she were confirming a rumour. "That's me," I told her. "And before you ask, Mr. Wolfe doesn't sell anything door to door." Her mouth twitched, somewhere between a smile and a surrender. "I was told you could help me." That line, delivered right, can get you in almost anywhere, and she delivered it like she'd practiced. I stood aside. "Come in, Mrs. Rolston, Inez Rolston." She crossed the threshold like someone who'd never had to wait for an invitation. The skirt whispered, the heels clicked, and the perfume expanded until it almost needed its own chair. In the office, Wolfe was still motionless, but his eyelids twitched, his version of curiosity. I introduced her, and she inclined her head just enough to acknowledge his existence without conceding superiority. Not many people manage that trick. Wolfe opened his eyes. "Madam, you intrude upon digestion." "I'm sorry," she said, though she didn't sound it. But I had nowhere else to go. That line too has mileage. I took my chair behind the desk, ready to record the usual litany of suspicions, betrayals, and regrets that keep us in beer and roast duck. "My husband," she began, "is Charles Rolston of Rolston and Blythe, investment brokers. Last week his partner was murdered." I blinked. "You don't waste time warming up." She looked at me, then back to Wolfe. "Mr. Blythe was found in his office. The police think it was a robbery. It wasn't." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "And you know this because—" She hesitated, twisting her gloves. "Because there were threats to my husband and to me." I took out my notebook. "Blackmail?" She nodded. "Letters, demands for money. Mr. Blythe was paying, apparently. I found out only after his death. Now someone's been following me. I'm frightened." Her voice hit the last word softly, like a stage cue. Wolfe reached for his beer, illegal at that hour by house ordinance, but Fritz wasn't there to witness the crime, and took a long sip. "Madam, fear is a constant of existence. What do you expect me to do with yours?" She blinked. "Find out who killed Mr. Blythe before they come for my husband, or me." "Have you consulted the police?" "Yes, Inspector Kramer. He dismissed me." I suppressed a grin. The idea of Kramer dismissing a woman like Inez Rolston was almost touching. Maybe he thought you'd hired the wrong kind of detective. Her eyes found mine. "And have I?" That one landed square. I looked to Wolfe, who was already studying her as if she were an exotic fungus newly sprouted on a log. "Mrs. Rolston," he said, "your tale lacks proportion. You suspect a conspiracy of murder and extortion, yet you come to me unescorted, without documents and without police sanction. Why?" She swallowed. "Because my husband won't. He says it will ruin us if the story gets out. but I can't wait for the next bullet. She opened her handbag, drew out an envelope and placed it on the desk. The weight and thickness spoke before she did. "My retainer," she said. The smell of fresh currency is one scent Wolfe has never been immune to. He regarded it like a man evaluating a truffle. "How much?" 5,000. Wolfe's eyebrows rose a full eighth of an inch. For him, that was equivalent to a standing ovation. "Acceptable," he murmured. That's when every instinct I had started doing handsprings. The woman was smooth, the story was neat, and the timing, right after a partner's murder, was too tidy. "Hold on," I said. "Before we redecorate the safe, maybe she could give us a few facts. Who exactly was making the threats? Did you see the letters?" She shook her head. "They were destroyed." "Convenient," I said. She stiffened. "Are you implying—" "I'm implying," I said, "that paper burns faster than innocence." Her eyes flashed. Wolfe intervened, voice steady as granite. "Archie." "Yes, sir?" "You will refrain from provoking our client until I decide whether she is one. Sit." That word client hit like a verdict. I sat. Wolfe folded his hands. "Mrs. Ralston, we require particulars. The nature of your husband's business, his associates, any irregularities in his accounts. He would never discuss those with me." "Then we shall have to ask him directly," Wolfe said. "Archie will arrange an appointment." She rose, a tremor passing through her posture like wind over silk. "Please, don't tell him yet. Let me speak to him first." "Madam," Wolfe said, "this office does not operate upon furtive premises. Truth withheld breeds failure. If you deceive me, I shall abandon you to your fears without regret." She bit her lip, then nodded. "All right, I'll persuade him tonight. You'll hear from me tomorrow." I stood to show her out, but Wolfe's voice stopped me. "Archie, the envelope." "Right." I scooped it up and slipped it into the safe. When I turned back, she was studying Wolfe the way a novice gambler studies the house, wondering if the game was fair. At the door, she paused. "You don't believe me?" I smiled. Belief's above my pay grade, but I've been wrong before. She left a faint shimmer of gardenia in the air and the sound of her heels fading down the stoop. When I returned, Wolfe was already reaching for the bell cord. Fritz appeared within seconds, tray at the ready. That's the kind of timing you get when food's involved. "Beer," Wolfe said. "And one for Mr. Goodwin." I accepted. "Breaking the noon rule?" "A calculated indulgence," he said. "A woman who brings $5,000 may be forgiven for disrupting digestion." I took a swallow. "Sure, and when she turns out to be lying through that yellow hat, we can use the bills to wallpaper the office." He eyed me. "Your skepticism is chronic. A woman's fear is seldom simulated with such restraint." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe she's playing the long con. Those eyes had more rehearsal than sincerity." He closed his own. "You are an irrepressible romantic." "Thanks. I'll embroider it on a pillow." Silence settled. The clock ticked, the beer gleamed, and the city hummed beyond the curtained windows. Finally he said, "Archie, the Ralston and Blythe firm. Obtain their public filings, press mentions, and any account of Mr. Blythe's murder. Also, discover whether Mrs. Ralston possesses independent means. We must know whether she hires us from desperation or calculation." "That'll take legwork," I said, "and a little shoe leather." "Apply both." I stood. "Suppose I find out her husband's cleaner than the Board of Health." "Then," Wolfe said, eyes still closed, "we shall discover who profits by sullying him." He reached for his beer again, which meant the conversation was over. I started for the hall, but curiosity made me pause. "You think she's on the level?" "I think," he said, "that veracity, like perfume, lingers only until the air clears." That was Wolfe at his poetic best, which usually meant he was about half convinced and half intrigued. Downstairs, I watched from the window as Mrs. Ralston climbed into a taxi. Even at a distance, the hat glowed like a small sun in the grey afternoon. Fritz entered quietly behind me. "Will dinner be delayed again, Mr. Goodwin?" "Depends," I said. "If that lady's story cooks as fast as her perfume, maybe permanently." He frowned, uncertain whether I was joking, and returned to his kitchen. Upstairs I heard the faint creak of Wolfe's chair, the sound of a man settling into thought. That was always the most dangerous time. When Wolfe started thinking, Someone's secret began dying of exposure. I jotted notes in the logbook: time of visit, description, retainer received, and under client reliability I wrote a single word: questionable. Then I underlined it twice. The envelope in the safe might have been heavy, but the air in the office was heavier. Somewhere between the roast, the orchids, and the woman in the yellow hat, I knew the brownstone's piece had just been repossessed. I shut the logbook, locked the drawer, and said to no one in particular, "Here we go again. If you want to see what greed looks like when it puts on a necktie, drop by a brokerage office after a partner's been shot. The marble floor still shines, the phones still hum, but everyone walks like the ghost might be checking the ticker." That was the atmosphere at Ralston and Blythe when I showed up at 3:15 sharp, just in time to catch the clerks pretending they weren't talking about the corpse. The building smelled of cigars, floor wax, and fear, the kind of mix that tells you business is bad and no one's admitting it. The firm occupied the 11th floor, all glass partitions and good taste bought wholesale. A bronze plaque announced Ralston and Blythe, investments, discretion, integrity. Whoever picked the motto should have added, and the occasional homicide. The receptionist, Miss Green according to her nameplate, was the kind of woman who'd mastered the art of disapproval before breakfast. Her lipstick was ambitious, her perfume belligerent. She looked up at me the way a customs officer looks at a suitcase with too many stickers. "Can I help you?" "You already are," I said. Your face brightened the lobby by 3-candle power. "Archie Goodwin, here on behalf of a client." Her eyebrows met briefly for a conference. "We're not hiring." "Good. I'm not applying. I'm here to discuss the late Mr. Blythe." That got her attention. She lowered her voice to funeral volume. "You police?" "Not the kind that carries a badge. I'm with Mr. Nero Wolfe." Recognition flickered. "Oh, him." "Yeah," I said. "The fat man who solves murders between courses." That cracked her shell just enough for a smirk. "Mr. Ralston isn't in." "I didn't expect him to be. He's the kind who's always out when things go wrong. I'll start smaller. Maybe someone in records." Her expression said she'd rather feed me to the adding machines. "We can't show private material." "Of course you can't," I said. "But you can talk about it." She tapped a pencil. "The police already took the ledgers." "All of them?" She hesitated, half a second but long enough. "Except one," I said. "Right?" The pencil stopped tapping. "Who told you that?" "You just did. Thanks." Her colour rose a notch, but she recovered. "It was misplaced." "Misplaced, sure. Maybe it fell behind a dividend." She reached for the phone like it was a life raft. "I'll call security." "Fine. While you do, tell them to polish their shoes. I like a professional escort." That earned me a glare sharp enough to peel wallpaper. She dialed, muttered, and hung up. "Mr. Harris will be right out." 2 minutes later, a man with a jaw like reinforced concrete appeared. The name tag said Security, Harris. The eyes said Bulldog on retainer. "Problem?" he asked. "No problem," I said. "Just a few questions about Mr. Blythe's last days." "This is private property." "So is the cemetery, but reporters still visit." He moved half a step closer. "Leave." I grinned. I'd hate to. I was just starting to enjoy the atmosphere. A cathedral where the gods of margin lived on nervous sweat. Miss Green sniffed. "You have a poet's mouth for a detective." "Strictly amateur verse," I said. "Now tell me, did Mrs. Ralston visit this office recently?" The pencil started tapping again. "Why?" "Because someone saw her arguing with Blythe a few days before he got perforated. I like to confirm my gossip before lunch." Her lips tightened. "I don't recall." "Try again. Memory improves under exercise." Harris folded his arms. "That's enough." I sighed. "You people are allergic to conversation. Fine. Give Mr. Ralston my card. He can call if he prefers his firm's reputation aired in smaller print." That got her. She looked at the card, then at me, calculating damage. "Wait." I waited. "She was here," she said finally. "Tuesday afternoon. They quarrelled. She left crying. I thought it was about money." "What kind of money?" "How would I know? He was shouting about entries and discrepancies, that's all." I jotted notes. "You should moonlight for the Gazette. They pay for this stuff." Her mouth twitched. "Mr. Ralston will be furious I spoke to you." "Then we're even," I said. "My boss will be furious I wasted the cab fare." As I turned, the phone on her desk buzzed. She listened, nodded, and said, "Yes, he's still here." That he being me was obvious, because Harris immediately blocked the exit. "Mr. Ralston will see you," she said. That was a surprise. I followed Harris down a corridor lined with framed certificates proving the firm's respectability. Ralston's office was the size of a small courtroom, panelled in walnut, curtains drawn against the grey afternoon. The man behind the desk looked like he'd been tailored from a profit and loss statement, lean, neat, and unhappy. "Goodwin," he said. "That's right, representing Nero Wolfe." Why would Wolfe concern himself with my affairs? "Your wife hired him." His expression froze, then thawed just enough for indignation. She had no right. She seemed to think bullets gave her the right. He rose abruptly. "This is intolerable." "Agreed," I said. "So, let's make it tolerable. One ledger's missing. Where is it?" He blinked. "Ledger? Don't play dumb. The police inventory listed 12, there were 13. Number 9's absent. That ring a bell?" He sank back into his chair. "Blythe kept that one, his private client's." "And you haven't seen it since he died?" "No." "Any reason your wife would?" He hesitated. Inez knew nothing about the business. "Then what did she and Blythe argue about?" "I don't know. She told me afterward it was personal." "Meaning?" He rubbed his temples. "Mr. Blythe was an old friend. Too old, perhaps." "Ah," the red herring wagged its tail. "Romantic history? I'd rather not discuss it." "Fine," I said. "But if the gossip mills grind out her name beside his, don't blame me." He exhaled smoke and silence. "Tell Wolfe I'll expect a report before he makes any public insinuations." "Sure, we'll send it with the bill." Outside, Harris reappeared to escort me to the elevator. He didn't speak, which was a relief. My quota of growls was filled for the day. By the time I reached the street, the sky was the colour of stale coffee, and the traffic had the rhythm of a migraine. I ducked into a diner on Madison for a sandwich and a call. The payphone booth smelled of nickel and disinfectant. Wolfe answered on the second ring. "Goodwin." "Reporting from the Cathedral of Nervous Sweat," I said. "Blythe's missing ledger's our choir book. Everyone swears it never existed." "Phooey, you've been gone 2 hours." "Madison traffic moves slower than your metabolism." "That is impertinent." "True, but accurate. I picked up a few notes. Mrs. Ralston quarrelled with Blythe, and the firm's as jittery as a cheap stock." He grunted. "Astonishing that criminal acts unsettle financiers. Return at once." "Can't yet. I want to nose around the police precinct for confirmation of that inventory." "Archie, you will cultivate restraint." "I'm cultivating my street education, sir." A pause. Then, "You're insufferable. Be here for dinner. Fritz will not delay it for your delinquency." "Wouldn't dream of it. Over and out." I hung up, finished the sandwich, and looked through the diner window at the stream of grey suits hustling past. Finance had its own perfume, ink, fear, and ambition, and I'd just gotten a deep whiff. One of the suits outside lingered a second too long, pretending to light a cigarette while watching me. Maybe coincidence, maybe surveillance. Either way, I took it as a compliment. I stepped out, matched his reflection in the glass, and saw him retreat toward the corner. Thin, hat brim low, raincoat collar up. Not one of Kramer's men. That meant private interest. Someone who didn't want the police knowing they cared. Back at the curb, I flagged a cab. As it rattled downtown, I rehearsed the facts. 1 dead partner, 1 missing ledger, 1 client too beautiful for honesty. It wasn't a complete picture, but the frame already looked expensive. When I reached the brownstone, the orchids were getting their afternoon sermon upstairs, and the smell of roast lamb drifted from the kitchen. Fritz passed me in the hall with a polite nod. He knew better than to ask how the day had gone. In the office, Wolfe was reading, feet planted on the footstool, lips pursed. Without looking up, he said, "Report." I gave it in detail, ending with the red herring about Blythe's supposed romance. He snorted softly. "A woman's tears may serve many functions, but sincerity is seldom among them. The missing ledger concerns money, not sentiment." "Then we follow the money," I said. "Tomorrow," he said, closing the book. "For now, dinner. I refuse to digest deceit on an empty stomach." I grinned. "Fine by me. But if we're billing by appetite, tell Mrs. Ralston she can start selling those hats." Wolf's eyes narrowed, but there was the ghost of approval in them. Archie, you are frivolous, but occasionally apt. Which, coming from Wolfe, was practically an embrace. Dinner at 8 is as fixed in Wolfe's universe as gravity, and it takes an act of God or Inspector Kramer to interfere. That evening we were halfway through Fritz's Duc à l'Orange, a performance piece with crisp skin and an aroma that could make a priest break Lent, when the bell rang. Wolfe's eyelids drooped in despair. Mine brightened. Nothing improves digestion like watching Kramer choke on Wolfe's composure. Fritz went to answer. I heard the unmistakable growl in the vestibule, followed by the shuffle of a man entering a room he didn't want to respect. When Kramer appeared in the doorway, the air lost 20 degrees of civility. His hat was in his hand, his cigar stub clenched like a grievance. "Evening," he said. "Hope I'm not interrupting." "You are," Wolfe replied. "Sit, if you must. Fritz, a chair." Fritz set one beside the table and escaped with a look that said he'd rather face the duck again in its original form. Kramer didn't sit right away. He stared at the plates, then at us. "You heard from a Mrs. Inez Ralston today?" Wolfe dabbed his lips with a napkin. "Heard, yes. Listened, perhaps. Consented to be hired, indeed." "That's so. Her husband's a suspect in the Blythe shooting. Thought you might want to pick better company." I leaned back. "Since when do you screen our clients, Inspector? We'd need a larger lobby." He ignored me. "This woman shows up at your door, and 2 hours later we find her husband's gun wiped clean. You don't call it coincidence?" "Coincidence," Wolfe said, "is merely the word we use when the pattern eludes us." Kramer scowled. "Save the philosophy. I just want to know what she told you." Wolfe regarded him as though considering whether human language was worth the effort. "That, sir, falls under the sanctity of professional confidence." "Don't hand me that." Kramer dropped into the chair. "You and I both know you don't get privilege unless you're a priest or a lawyer." "I," Wolfe said smoothly, "am neither. I am worse. A private detective with integrity. Coffee, Archie." I rose. "Inspector, you'll take some? Beer's sacred territory here." He grunted. "Coffee's fine. Black." I fetched it while he lit a fresh cigar, filling the room with the fragrance of police persistence. When I came back, Wolfe had already resumed eating with the serene rhythm of a man timing his fork by metronome. Kramer sipped, then spoke around the steam. "Her husband says he doesn't know anything about threats or blackmail. Claims his wife's hysterical." "Many men," Wolfe said, "have misdiagnosed women. It is rarely fatal." "Maybe not to you." Kramer jabbed the cigar toward him. "I think she's hiding something. Maybe she pulled the trigger herself and wants you to point elsewhere." That one landed like a fly in the soup. Wolfe set down his fork. "Inspector, you are speculating without nourishment. Mrs. Ralston, in her distress, sought counsel. I extended civility, not conspiracy." "Then why'd she pay you $5,000? I whistled softly. "News travels fast." Kramer shot me a glare. "Don't get cute, Goodwin. We've got witnesses saw her draw cash this morning. She said it was for protection." "Which she has now," I said, "if conversation counts." He shifted his bulk. "Don't make me subpoena your files." Wolfe sighed, a sound like wind through granite. "You would thereby waste the court's time and the taxpayers' money. I have no file yet, only recollection, and that, fortunately, remains unseizable." Kramer's mouth twitched around the cigar. "You always find a way to dance around cooperation." "Not dance," Wolfe corrected. "Sidestep." I chuckled. "Elegant footwork for a man who never leaves his chair." Wolfe turned his gaze on me, mild, warning, affectionate. "Archie, the inspector mistakes obstinacy for virtue. Kindly refrain from encouraging him." That got me a sideways look from Kramer. "He's your mouthpiece now?" "My assistant," Wolfe said firmly, "not my scapegoat. Address your inquiries to me." Kramer grunted again. "Fine. Here's an inquiry. Why'd your client lie about seeing Blythe before he died? Witness at the firm says they argued." Wolfe dabbed at the corner of his mouth. "Perhaps she wished to spare her husband's sensibilities, or mine." "You're covering for her." "I am preserving perspective. A woman's quarrel proves temper, not guilt." Kramer leaned forward. "The husband's gun was wiped clean. He says it hasn't been fired in years. Ballistics might say otherwise." "That," Wolfe murmured, "is your métier, not mine." Silence expanded like a gas. The only sounds were cutlery, the faint city hum beyond the windows, and Kramer's breathing, heavy, annoyed, professional. Finally he said, "You sure know how to make cooperation painful." "It keeps me lean," Wolfe said. I couldn't resist. "From what angle?" He ignored me. "Inspector," he continued, "should your investigation require intellect rather than intrusion, I am, as always, at the city's disposal, within reason." Kramer puffed smoke. "Reason? You wouldn't recognize it if it came with mustard." He rose, knocking ash into the coffee saucer. "All right, Wolfe, I'll play your game, but if I find out you're withholding material evidence, I'll have that warrant before dessert." Wolfe's eyes closed briefly, as if in benediction. "Then I shall eat quickly." Kramer stared, half tempted to argue, but Fritz reappeared with the next course. Crepes, flawless and fragrant. That was Fritz's strategy for peacekeeping. Distract the combatants with excellence. I handed Kramer his coat. "Next time, Inspector, give us notice. Fritz hates to serve for 3. He jammed on the hat. "Next time, Goodwin, tell your boss to answer the phone like a human being." "We tried that once," I said. "Didn't suit the decor." He started toward the hall, then stopped. "For what it's worth," he said without turning, "I don't think Ralston fired that gun either. Somebody's setting him up, maybe your lady client." That was new, and suspiciously generous. "You softening, Inspector?" I asked. He growled, "Don't bet on it." Then he left, door closing like a final period. Fritz sighed and cleared the untouched plate from Kramer's chair. Wolfe resumed eating as if silence were seasoning. After a minute, I said, "You heard him. The husband's in the crosshairs." "Yes." Wolfe lifted his glass, the amber beer catching candlelight. "So, we must determine who aimed them. Tomorrow, 9 sharp. Bring the morning papers and your wits, preferably sharpened." I nodded. "Right after breakfast." He gave me a look that suggested limits to his tolerance. "After orchids." "Of course," I said. "Wouldn't want them jealous of my company." He grunted, half amusement, half weariness, and raised the beer. "To professional honor, Archie. So rare it's almost corruption." I lifted mine. "And to dinner without visitors." Fritz, passing through, muttered, "If wishes were ducks." I grinned. "They'd all be à l'orange." Wolfe closed his eyes, contented, and the brownstone settled back into peace, brief, fragile, and worth every interruption. By the time the phone rang that night, the brownstone was as still as a monastery after Vespers. Wolfe had retired to the orchids. Fritz was polishing silver with the zeal of a man defending Switzerland, and I was at my desk wondering whether Mrs. Ralston's perfume had any ingredient that made a man forget his paycheck. The ring cut through the quiet. I picked up. Saul Pantzer's voice came low and unhurried, like a man reporting on tomorrow's weather. "Found it, Archie. The missing ledger." That perked me faster than coffee. "Where?" "In a pawn shop on 47th. Owner says a clerk named Kessler brought it in this afternoon. Claimed it was his. He works for Ralston and Blythe." I whistled softly. A junior clerk pawning evidence. That's ambition. Saul's chuckle was dry. He looked nervous enough to sell his shoes next. I tailed him after he left. He's at a joint on 52nd, the Blue Harbour. You'll like the decor, cheap whiskey and cheaper lighting. "Hold him there," I said. "Order something that won't kill you. I'm on my way." Wolfe was still upstairs, so I left a note. Out for air and embezzlement. A.G. Then I grabbed my hat and headed into the city's night breath, thick, damp, and full of cab horns playing the Manhattan blues. The Blue Harbour was a dive with aspirations. A neon anchor blinked outside, threatening to drown. Inside, cigarette haze hung like stage fog, and a piano in the corner was losing an argument with a drunk tenor. Saul sat at the bar, flat cap low, glass of seltzer sweating in his hand. When he saw me, his eyes flicked toward a booth near the back. That's where Kessler sat, mid-20s, thin enough to qualify as a roomer, nursing a rye with both hands. His suit was office grey turned street brown, his tie crooked like his luck. Saul murmured, "He's been checking the door every 30 seconds, expecting someone." "Let's see who," I said. At 9:41 p.m. she arrived. Gardenia again, only fainter, like an echo through money. Mrs. Inez Ralston. Same poise, same chill. She moved through the room without touching a soul, every male head turning like compass needles. Kessler half rose, startled. She sat opposite him, back to us, and opened her purse. "Looks like the lady's paying her respects," I said. "Or her accomplices," Saul muttered. I watched her slide a long envelope across the table. He peeked inside, eyes widening. Whatever was in there brought him surprise before it brought him eternity. They talked, too low to hear, but Kessler's hands began to tremble. She leaned in, whispered something sharp, and stood. He tried to follow, but she lifted a gloved hand, commanding, final, and walked toward the door. I waited a heartbeat, then rose. "Keep her in sight," I told Saul. "If she heads home, note the route." He nodded and moved. I stayed on Kessler. The poor sap didn't get far. He lifted his glass, took a swallow, and made a sound halfway between a sigh and a gurgle. He had tapped the envelope's pinch of powder into his rye as she rose, like a man following instructions he didn't understand. Then he pitched forward, upsetting the drink. The glass rolled off the table and shattered, and every eye in the room turned toward the noise. I was there first, easing him back. His face had gone the colour of paste, his breath gone altogether. Poison acts faster than guilt, and this was express delivery. Someone shouted for a doctor, someone else for the police. I checked the envelope, still on the table, now empty. Whatever Mrs. Ralston had delivered, she'd taken the contents back, or made sure they delivered him. I slipped the envelope inside my jacket just as a bartender hustled over. "What happened?" "Bad liquor," I said. "You ought to complain to the brewery." He frowned. I saw him drinking rye, same as always. Maybe he got the special reserve. Then the sirens began. Experience told me my presence would only clutter Kramer's evening. I melted out the side door into the alley, where the smell of garbage fought the rain. Saul appeared seconds later, breath even, expression calm. "She ditched her cab 3 blocks down and disappeared into a side street," he said. "Professional exit." "Yeah," I said. "And she left me holding the envelope and a corpse. She's improving her technique." Saul eyed me. "What now?" "Now we call home before the orchids get jealous." Back at a phone booth, I fed a dime and dialed. Fritz answered, whisper quiet. "Yes, Mr. Goodwin." "Tell Wolfe to pick up. Urgent." A pause, then Wolfe's voice, measured and displeased. "Archie, it is nearly 10. Are you determined to shorten my life through aggravation?" "I'd hate to deprive the world of your charm, but one of our leads just died. Kessler, the clerk who pawned the ledger." "Died?" "Collapsed after meeting Mrs. Ralston at the Blue Harbour. Looked like poison." A long silence hummed over the line. Then, "You are certain?" "As certain as a man can be before the autopsy." "Pfui, and you remained at the scene?" "Long enough to avoid arrest." He inhaled audibly. "Return at once. Bring what you retrieved if it exists." An empty envelope. Maybe invisible ink, maybe air. Both have been known to conceal meaning. Be swift. When Wolfe said be swift, it meant he wanted results before breakfast. I grabbed a cab. Saul peeled off to keep an eye on Ralston's neighbourhood, promising updates before dawn. The brownstone door opened to Fritz's worried face. "Mr. Goodwin, there has been trouble." "Only the kind that keeps New York exciting. Where's the boss?" "In the office. He refuses beer until you return." "Then let's save his liver." Inside, Wolfe sat behind his desk, expression carved from patience and disapproval. The sight of the empty envelope did nothing to sweeten him. "You handled it," he said, "with your usual recklessness." "Sure," I said, "if recklessness means finding the corpse before it walks away." He examined the envelope under the lamp, turning it delicately between his fingers. "Plain bond, expensive, faint gardenia, her signature," Wolfe said. He had Fritz fetch the kit. A swab on the inner fold popped the reagent to a sunny yellow, cyanide. The talc masking the fold still reeked of gardenia. Whoever packed that envelope expected the drink to carry the blame. "I thought so," I said. She handed it to him. He drank. He died. She walked out without a smudge. "Indeed." Wolfe placed the envelope flat on the blotter. "You are unharmed?" "Bruised ego only. Cops arrived right after. They'll have questions tomorrow." "They will," Wolfe said. "And you will answer none beyond propriety. We must determine the content of what she gave him, and why remove it. The missing ledger, perhaps." "Saul's sure he saw that ledger in the pawn shop," I said. "Kessler claimed it was his. Maybe she was buying it back before the police found it. Possible, Wolfe murmured, or she was silencing him before he spoke. Same result. He rang for Fritz. Beer. Then to me, Archie, do you comprehend the risk you invite by shadowing murderers without consultation? Sure, I comprehend it and ignore it. He gave me the look usually reserved for idiocy in Latin. Your levity is misplaced. Maybe, but if this was a date, it needed fewer corpses and more cocktails. The corner of his mouth twitched, his version of laughter. Your folly, Mr. Goodwin, remains regrettably useful. I saluted. High praise. Want me to wake Saul for details? Not yet. Let him sleep, or surveil, whichever he prefers. He leaned back, closing his eyes, fingers steepled. 2 deaths in one enterprise indicate either carelessness or design. I favour design. Fritz entered with 2 chilled glasses and a tray. Wolfe poured carefully, the golden line unbroken. To Mr. Kessler, he said solemnly. May his accounting balance elsewhere. I clinked glasses. And to Mrs. Ralston, who's rewriting the books faster than we can read them. He frowned. Archie, flippancy corrodes judgment. Maybe, but it keeps the ulcers away. I took a sip. The beer was cold, the room warm, the city outside wide awake and full of lies. Somewhere out there, Mrs. Ralston was disposing of evidence and perfume bottles, and the next move was hers. Wolfe sighed. Tomorrow, Saul finalizes the photostats from the redeemed ledger, and we pass the original to Kramer. Tonight, we retire. I advise dreamless sleep. Dreamless is easy, I said. It's breakfast without headlines that's hard. He waved me off, already half lost to thought. The orchids were waiting upstairs, silent witnesses to his brooding. I finished the beer, filed my notes, and looked once more at the empty envelope on the desk. It lay there like a whisper that had forgotten its sentence. If Wolfe was right, and he usually was, the night had just shifted from mystery to murder in the space of a single drink. I turned out the lights, locked the office, and headed up to bed, telling myself that next time I'd let Saul buy the drinks. The Morning Gazette hit the stoop at 7:30 like a subpoena. Fritz brought it in on the breakfast tray with the kind of politeness one reserves for toxic materials. When he handed it to me, he did it with tongs of tone, gentle but implying I should wash afterward. Across the front page, under a headline big enough to embarrass a war, was my boss's name. Private detective tangled in double death. I read the first paragraph while my eggs cooled. The prose was pure Lon Cohen, fast, slick, and punctuated like a drum solo. Exclusive. Sources confirm that renowned investigator Nero Wolfe is linked to both the Blythe murder and the mysterious poisoning of a brokerage clerk late last night. It went on to quote unnamed officials who were either Kramer, a desk sergeant with imagination, or maybe me after 2 beers. When Wolfe entered, I folded the paper, hoping he'd notice the coffee first. He didn't. His eyes went straight to the headline. Archie. Yes, sir. What is the date? Today. I feared as much. He dropped into the chair with the weight of civilization. Cohen has debased journalism beyond its natural depravity. I poured his coffee. You're famous again. I always said you liked being famous, just not by name. Pfui. He adjusted the napkin across his vest. Notoriety is the dung of a claim. Then congratulations, you've got a bumper crop. He ignored that. Telephone Mr. Cohen, at once. By 8:10 I had Lon Cohen on the line at the Gazette. His voice sounded as if he'd been sleeping on deadlines instead of beds. Morning, Archie. You see the piece? Yeah, we framed it, he groaned. Don't start. My editor wanted blood. The police are whispering your boss's name louder than usual. Kramer? Maybe. Or the DA's boys. They say Wolfe's sitting on a witness who got himself poisoned. News to me, I said. If we were sitting on anything, Fritz would have dusted it. Tell Wolfe I didn't pick that headline. I'll print a clarification tomorrow. That's polite for a retraction without apology. It's the best I can do. I hung up and faced the storm front at the desk. Wolfe had the paper spread open like an autopsy report. His expression could have curdled butter. Mr. Goodwin, he said, our repute has been manhandled by journalistic vermin. True, but the vermin spelled your name right. He glared. The DA will interpret silence as guilt. The inspector will interpret words as obstruction. We are encircled by misapprehension. Before I could answer, the phone rang again. I picked up. Brownstone Bureau, where innocence is optional. "Goodwin," came Kramer's voice, thick with cigar smoke and irritation. "Tell Wolfe the DA's breathing down my neck. 2 deaths tied to your clients, that's enough for a warrant if he keeps playing monk." "He's listening." "Then listen, Wolfe," Kramer barked. "I know you didn't feed that Clark poison, but the DA doesn't share my appetite for patience. He wants statements, ledgers, something. You've got 24 hours before I bring a paper that won't need your signature." Wolfe's tone was glacial. "Inspector, your zeal does you credit, but it encroaches on prudence. I cannot conjure conclusions by decree." "Then conjure fast, and keep that sidekick of yours away from nightclubs." The click of the receiver was his farewell. I replaced mine gently. That was our Valentine from Kramer. Red ink, black border. Wolfe shut the paper and sat back, eyes half closed. "Archie, the world delights in scandal as hogs in swill. Our only defense is result." I could draft a statement for the Gazette, something like, "We deny everything, including the menu." "No," he waved a hand. "Words inflame, deeds extinguish." Which, translated, meant do something, Archie. I opened my notebook. "All right. The sequence so far: Blythe shot, Kessler poisoned, Ralston nervous, his wife mysterious, missing ledger still missing." Wolfe's eyes opened a fraction. "And public hysteria ascending." "Exactly. You could sue for libel, but that won't get us the ledger." He sighed, a long exhalation that could have powered a sailboat. "I must think. Orchids." That was dismissal. I followed him as far as the doorway just to keep the conversation human. "You know, boss, if the Gazette's right, you're the first detective to solve crimes by growing petunias." He didn't turn. "Orchids, Mr. Goodwin. Phalaenopsis schilleriana, not petunias." The elevator swallowed him. The office felt hollow without him, like a stage after curtain. I took to the typewriter and started a memo. Timeline, statements, suspects. It's a ritual that keeps the noise of suspicion from echoing too loud. Around 10:30, the phone rang again. I considered pretending to be the janitor, but professionalism won. "Goodwin speaking." Lon Cohen again, breathless. "Archie, the Gazette just got a call from the DA's office. They're holding a press conference at noon. Topic: investigative misconduct. They'll name Wolfe if he doesn't respond." I whistled. "You running another headline?" "Not if I can help it. Tell him to give me something. A quote, a denial, even a recipe." When I relayed that, Wolfe's voice floated down the stairwell from above. "Tell him the truth needs no advertisement." "Got it," I called back. "He says the truth's camera shy." Cohen groaned in my ear. "He'll be the death of my circulation." "Not if the poison gets you first," I said, and hung up. At 11, Wolfe descended from the plant rooms. He looked calmer, probably because orchids don't read newspapers. He took his chair, rang for Fritz, and said, "Beer." "Before lunch?" I asked. "This day requires fortification." Fritz brought 2 glasses, knowing my curiosity would demand solidarity. Wolfe raised his. "To equilibrium, Archie. The city shrieks, but we shall endure." I clinked his glass. "Sure, but if we start getting fan mail from Sing Sing, I'm transferring to horticulture." He actually smiled, briefly, the kind that makes you think the sun might rise twice. "Your levity, though misplaced, mitigates calamity. Your field sense, modest if erratic, remains indispensable." "Careful," I said. "You're flirting with sentiment." He set down the glass. "Nonsense. I'm merely acknowledging that without you, the brownstone would devolve into tranquility, and that would be intolerable." That was Wolfe's way of saying he was glad I hadn't been the one poisoned. I filed it under compliments. Rare addition. The noon headlines came by radio, Wolfe's name again, paired with the word investigation. He listened, impassive, while the announcer summarized half-truths and speculation. When it ended, he switched it off. "Archie," he said quietly, "fetch the Gazette photographer tomorrow at 9. I intend to reclaim my narrative." "You mean you're giving an interview?" He grimaced. "A correction. Publicity, properly pruned, may yet flower respect." I grinned. "Now you sound like an orchid." He allowed a snort. "Enough. Prepare our notes for this afternoon. Kramer will return, and I prefer to bruise him with precision, not bluster. Music to my ears, I said, rolling paper into the typewriter. And what headline would you like for tomorrow, boss? He closed his eyes. One word would suffice. Vindicated. Nice, I said. Short, printable, and, if we're lucky, true. He reached for the bell cord, summoning Fritz. The chime ended the morning's uproar the way punctuation ends a rant. Lunch was served on time, as always. Outside, the city buzzed with rumour, but inside, the brownstone breathed calm defiance, beer cold, orchid serene, and Wolfe plotting the day's next retaliation against both murder and journalism. That night, the brownstone after midnight had a personality all its own. The ledgers on Wolfe's desk were Saul's photostats from the pawned original he redeemed and logged, strictly legal, receipt and chain of custody intact, before we turned the book over to Kramer. Wolfe grunted once. That was the sound of discovery. You have found something, I said. Something, he replied, and nothing. Observe this column. Expenditures marked as client bonuses. Repeated quarterly, identical figures, no recipients. Maybe Blythe believed in consistency. Ha! Here, note the initials IR Holdings, a corporation registered in Delaware, now defunct. IR, as in Inez Ralston. He inclined his head. The coincidence is intolerable. The woman launders her thefts through shells, then conceals them as her partner's blackmail. That'd make her both thief and victim. Efficient. Venal, Wolfe said. Efficiency misapplied. He leaned back, steepling fingers. She uses allure as camouflage. You, Archie, are particularly susceptible. Phooey. Sure, I said. I fall for anyone who pays in cash. He ignored me and rang for beer. When none came, he remembered the hour, frowned, and settled for patience instead. Tomorrow we present Mrs. Ralston with these inconsistencies. Meanwhile, I want confirmation. Pursue the arithmetic. I knew that tone. It meant, go dig until someone hits you. Understood, I said. Shake the trees and see what money falls out. He gave a small, approving nod, the Wolfe version of applause. By 1 a.m. I was in a taxi heading uptown. Manhattan at that hour wears its conscience loosely. Streets half-lit, drunks performing philosophy on corners, and cabs that move like conspirators. The Ralstons' apartment building on Park Avenue glowed from the lobby like a shrine to compound interest. The night doorman sized me up. Delivery? Truth, I said. Special order. He didn't laugh, but he did buzz me through. Mrs. Ralston answered her own door, wrapped in a silk dressing gown the colour of expensive fog. The gardenia perfume was back, soft enough to sound innocent. Mr. Goodwin, at this hour? Arithmetic doesn't sleep. She sighed, half weary, half amused. Mr. Wolfe sent you? Indirectly. He found a few holes in your husband's ledgers, big enough to drive a moral through. Her expression didn't move. You think I'd know anything about business entries? I think you'd know who IR Holdings is. The initials have a familiar ring. She turned, crossing to a liquor cabinet. Scotch. Coffee, I said. Keeps me civil. You're mistaken, she said lightly. Those accounts were handled by our firm's accountant. Who's dead, poisoned, or missing? She froze, glass halfway to her lips. You're accusing me. Just observing. Every time someone meets you, they stop breathing soon after. Colour rose under her makeup. You're insolent. That's my charm. It keeps people honest or irritated. She set the glass down untouched. Mr. Goodwin, my husband and I are victims. Blythe defrauded us. We were trying to recover what was ours. Through Delaware shell companies. She smiled thinly. You're very persistent. Practice, I said. I've chased lies in better suits. For the first time, her eyes flickered. Not guilt, not yet, but calculation. Suppose you're right. Suppose money moved where it shouldn't. That doesn't make me a killer. No, I said, but it makes motive a family affair. She walked toward the window, drawing the drapes tighter. Outside, the city looked like spilled jewels. Mr. Wolfe sent you to trap me? Wolfe doesn't trap, I said. He just waits until gravity does the rest. She turned back, voice low. You think you're clever. You think because you carry his briefcase you can judge me. But you don't know what it's like to watch men play with fortunes while you smile beside them like furniture. That's touching, I said, but I still prefer furniture that doesn't poison the guests. Her hand trembled on the curtain cord. Leave. I didn't. You met Kessler last night. He died right after. You passed him an envelope, her chin lifted. Prove it. Soon. But you could save yourself some paperwork. For a moment I thought she'd crack. The lips parted, the eyes flicked sideways. But then the mask snapped back. You're bluffing. I've seen poker faces before, I said, but yours could have bluffed a mirror. That did it. She moved fast, slapping the drape aside as if hunting air, then stopped herself. When she spoke again, her tone was steady. I have nothing more to say. Then I'll let the numbers talk, I said. They're friendlier anyway. At the door she hesitated. Tell Mr. Wolfe, she said, that arithmetic can prove anything, if you choose the right equation. That was either philosophy or confession. I left before she subtracted me. Back in the cab, I replayed her every glance and tremor. Fear, yes, but not the kind that comes from guilt alone. She was covering for someone, maybe her husband, maybe herself twice removed. At 2:15, the brownstone came back into view, dark except for the slit of light under Wolfe's office door. I let myself in quietly. He was still awake, sitting amid ledgers and lamplight, as immovable as arithmetic itself. He looked up. You have been gone 3 hours. Traffic, I said. Also interrogation. She's good, icy, poised, maybe guilty. Details. I gave them, every word, every twitch. He listened without interruption, eyes half closed, head slightly tilted. When I finished, he reached for the bell cord. Fritz appeared in pyjamas and moral outrage. Beer, Wolfe said. 2. When the glasses arrived, Wolfe raised his. To deceit, which compels intelligence, I clinked, and to accountants who make both possible. He tasted, sighed contentedly, and said, She nearly confessed, you say? She blinked at the arithmetic. That ledger's her weak spot. He nodded. Then tomorrow we demonstrate that blackmail was merely bookkeeping. Her bookkeeping. And if she bolts? Then we chase her through numbers, not streets. The police will suffice for pursuit. I leaned back. You're sure it's her? He studied me, eyes softening a shade. No, but your instinct presses the correct bruise. I'm learning, reluctantly, to respect it. Careful, I said. Next you'll start liking me. Pfui, respect is a colder virtue. He drained the glass, set it down, and added, You did well, though I detest your improvisations. Your folly remains, how shall I say, regrettably useful. Thanks, I said. Next time I'll embroider that on my hatband. He reached for the last ledger. Enough chatter. Arithmetic never sleeps, but men must. I stood, stretching. Sure, but if she's right and arithmetic can prove anything, maybe tomorrow it proves murder. Wolfe looked up, eyes glinting. It will prove something, Archie. Our task is to choose the equation. He turned back to the columns, already lost in their deceit. I left him to the numbers, climbed the stairs, and told myself that sleep was just another calculation I intended to lose. If grief had a colour, it would have matched Mrs. Blythe's living room, muted beige, soft and expensive. The kind of place where tragedy had to take its shoes off before entering. The maid let me in with the same expression undertakers reserve for late payments. Mrs. Blythe rose from a divan near the window, pale in a grey silk gown that whispered money and mourning in equal measure. Her eyes were dry, but you could tell they'd earned the right not to be. Mr. Goodwin, she said, from Mr. Wolfe's office. That's right. I bring neither condolences nor subpoenas, just questions. A faint smile twitched her lips. Then you're an improvement on most callers this week. She gestured toward an armchair. Please. I sat, sinking into upholstery that felt like it had a private income. You knew your husband was concerned about the firm's finances. I knew he was angry, she said quietly. Not just about money, about betrayal. He told me Ralston was siphoning funds using false clients and dummy accounts. He wanted to go to the police. But he didn't. Her gaze drifted to the window. He was afraid. He said once you name a thief in Wall Street circles, you stop being respectable, alive or dead. Your husband had foresight. She gave a small, humorless laugh. He had fear. They come in the same suit. Did he keep proof? I asked. Her hands, resting in her lap, tightened slightly. He said he did. A ledger, a set of notes, but he kept them out of my reach. Smart man, I said. If the killer didn't find them, we might. She studied me. You believe Ralston killed him? I believe your husband died trying to tell the truth to people who preferred fiction. The maid entered with tea on a tray. Everything clinked softly, the civilized soundtrack of guilt. I took the cup out of courtesy and noticed a telegram lying half under the teapot, the corner showing just enough to tempt a snoop. May I asked. Mrs. Blythe hesitated, then nodded. It arrived the night before he was shot. The message was brief, all caps. Stop the meeting, danger from inside, VR. Who's VR? I asked. She shook her head. He never said. He only looked at it, then tore it up. I pieced it together after the police left. That's devotion, I said. You play puzzles for love. Her tone chilled. It was his life's work I was protecting, not a hobby. Before I could reply, the door opened. A man entered without knocking, a lawyer from Central Casting, right down to the pinstripe armour and an attaché case that probably carried more secrets than a confessional. Ah, Mrs. Blythe, he said smoothly. I'm sorry to intrude. His eyes flicked to me. Visitor? Mr. Goodwin, she said. He's assisting the investigation. Of course, the man said. Durgan, legal counsel for the estate. I shook his hand. His grip was dry, practiced, and as sincere as a campaign promise. I'm sure Mr. Wolfe's representative won't need long, Durgan added. That depends, I said. Sometimes we find what we need quickly. Sometimes we need to ask about telegrams. His eyelids lowered just enough to be interesting. Telegram? Yes, I said, holding it up. This little warning from a VR. Ring any bells? Mrs. Blythe shifted slightly. Durgan's smile stayed glued on. I'm afraid I wouldn't know. The firm received many communications. This one didn't go to the firm, I said. It went to her husband at home. I see. He adjusted his tie, the universal gesture of men rearranging their conscience. I'm not at liberty to discuss clients, living or deceased. Deceased makes it easier, I said. They rarely sue. He ignored me, turning to Mrs. Blythe. I must remind you that until probate clears, you're not to share company materials or correspondence with outsiders. She flinched almost imperceptibly, and that was enough. The telegram wasn't company mail. It was personal, dangerous, and Durgan wanted it buried. I'll be sure to mention your devotion to privacy, I said. He gave a short bow. Please do. Mrs. Blythe rose, the interview ending itself. Mr. Goodwin, I think that's all I can tell you. Maybe, I said, standing. But for what it's worth, I think your husband would have wanted the truth aired, not embalmed. Her eyes softened for a moment. Do you ever stop being glib? Only on my day off. At the door, Durgan extended a polite smile that belonged in an obituary photo. Good evening. Sure, I said. For some of us. The hallway smelled faintly of polish and quiet despair. When the elevator doors closed, I took out my notebook and jotted the letters VR in block capitals. Could be a name, a firm, a code, or just another breadcrumb meant to send us running in circles. Outside, the city was dripping with fog and neon, the kind of night where everyone looked like they were lying about something. I headed back to the brownstone, rolling the clues over like dice. Wolfe was in the office, glowering at a chessboard as if it had insulted him. The board vanished the moment I stepped in. Business displaced contemplation. Well, he asked. Mrs. Blythe sings the widow blues in the key of sincerity, I said. She says her husband was about to expose Ralston's creative bookkeeping. She's got a telegram warning him off. A VR sent it the night before he died. He looked up sharply. A warning? Yep. Danger from inside, delivered too late for comfort. He frowned. And this VR? Unknown? Except to the widow's lawyer, who suddenly developed a hearing problem when I mentioned it. Describe him. Durgan. Polished, predatory, and allergic to daylight. Pfui, Wolfe said. A lawyer, then. Certified. Wolfe leaned back, fingers drumming the arm of his chair. So Blythe prepared to expose Ralston, received a warning, ignored it, and perished. Mrs. Ralston profits, Kessler dies to conceal evidence, and the ledger's purpose becomes apparent. Meaning? Meaning, Wolfe said. The embezzlement was not a crime of greed, but of desperation. Someone needed money quickly and believed secrecy safer than exposure. Maybe VR thought otherwise. Or VR is our murderer's conscience belatedly articulate. He reached for the bell cord, then thought better of it. You handled the widow delicately? As delicately as a cop in a china shop. But she cracked a little, enough to make me believe she's scared of the wrong person. Indeed. He paused, eyes half closing. Mr. Goodwin, I commend your empathy. Rarely applicable, but on occasion competent. Why, thank you, I said. Coming from you, that's practically a love letter. He ignored that. Tomorrow we speak to Mr. Ralston. The arithmetic must be balanced before the police add their own sums. He turned back to the chessboard, moving a knight like a man setting a trap. I filed my notes, yawned, and said, For the record, grief may not wear makeup, but it certainly knows where the powder is. Wolfe grunted. Your levity is barbaric, yet oddly serviceable. And that was the brownstone's version of applause. Kramer came in that morning like a thunderstorm with a badge. He didn't wait for me to announce him. He shoved the door open, trailing cigar smoke, authority, and the faint smell of precinct coffee. If Fritz had been in the room, he'd have called for fumigation. It was 10:23, a bad time for interruptions. Wolfe was still digesting breakfast and had the look of a man not inclined to digest anything else, especially a police inspector. Goodwin, Kramer barked. Tell your boss I'm not in the mood. I grinned. You're in luck, Inspector. He never requires mood from visitors, only grammar. Archie, Wolfe's voice came from behind the desk, deep as an organ chord. Do stop provoking the man. Sit, Inspector. Kramer didn't sit. He planted himself in front of the desk and dropped a folded paper on it. That's the DA's order for subpoenas. If I don't see cooperation soon, you'll both be giving statements downtown. Wolfe examined the paper as if it were a piece of bad literature. Cooperation, Inspector, presupposes the presence of intelligence on both sides. I prefer to converse, not capitulate. Kramer's jaw twitched. You always talk like a textbook, Wolfe. Maybe that's why people stop listening. Then they miss the point, Wolfe said mildly. I offered. I could translate into cop. Shut up, Goodwin. See? He understands me perfectly, I said. Kramer's eyes shot me a glare that could have seared bacon. Wolfe's sigh filled the room like smoke. Archie, enough. Kramer paced to the window, stabbing the air with his cigar. 2 dead men, Wolfe. Blythe and that clerk. The DA's losing patience, so am I. As am I, Wolfe replied, with bluster mistaken for diligence. That did it. Kramer spun. You think this is a game? The DA wants results, not riddles. Then he should hire conjurers, Wolfe said. I am engaged for truth. Truth, Kramer growled, doesn't keep a retainer. It sustains it, Wolfe corrected. The silence that followed had the density of lead. I stayed put, halfway between referee and firing squad witness. Finally, I said, if we could keep this friendly, Inspector, Fritz just waxed the floor. Kramer snorted and dropped into the red leather chair. All right, talk. What's your angle? Wolfe leaned back, fingertips meeting at chin level. The classic pose, the one that meant somebody was about to learn humility. The angle, Inspector, is arithmetic. Mrs. Inez Ralston embezzled through her husband's firm. Mr. Blythe discovered it and prepared exposure. The clerk, Kessler, held proof, until he died of poison delivered, I suspect, by her intermediary. She is the fulcrum, the rest are her levers. Kramer blew smoke toward the ceiling. That's neat. Too neat. You've got no evidence, just theories wrapped in adjectives. Evidence awaits recognition, Wolfe said. Her Delaware shell companies, her ledger alterations, her proximity to 2 deaths, each fact alone insufficient, together irrefutable. Kramer leaned forward. You've seen her again? I have not. Mr. Goodwin has. Figures, Kramer muttered. Every time there's a blonde in trouble, you send him. I shrugged. I'm cheaper than fingerprints. Cheaper, maybe, Kramer said, but less admissible in court. Wolfe's tone sharpened. Inspector, you will not impugn my assistant's competence. Mr. Goodwin's fieldwork is integral to this inquiry. I gave Wolfe a mock salute. See, Kramer? I'm integral, like wallpaper. Like dynamite, Kramer said. Gentlemen, Wolfe cut in, the matter of mutual respect is settled. Proceed, Inspector. Kramer jabbed the cigar at him. Fine. Let's say you're right. She's behind the money trick. That still doesn't prove she killed anybody. No, Wolfe said, but the pattern compels inquiry. Blythe's murder eliminated discovery. Kessler's death silenced verification. Both deaths in succession serve her preservation. That, Inspector, is design. Kramer grunted. And you're planning to prove this how? By hypnotizing her? By reason, Wolfe said. You may try it sometime. I stifled a laugh and pretended to check my notes. Kramer rose, pacing again. The DA won't wait. He wants statements and he wants them now. If I give you 24 hours, that's charity, not policy. Then I shall treat it as both, Wolfe said. Kramer stopped pacing and stared. You're serious. I am perpetually serious, Wolfe said. Archie will obtain written records from the brokerage, and I will compose a memorandum delineating the chain of culpability. Within a day you will have substance, not speculation. Substance, Kramer repeated. All right, but if I don't, I'll be back with a warrant and a headache. You already have one, I said helpfully. The warrant would just make it official. Kramer gave me a look that belonged on wanted posters. You think you're funny, Goodwin? Only before lunch, I said. After that, I'm tragic. Wolfe lifted a finger. Archie. Sorry, sir. Habit. Kramer sighed and sat again. For a moment the office felt almost peaceful. He tapped ash into the tray, eyes narrowing. You really think she's that clever, Wolfe? Killing a partner, a clerk, fixing ledgers, without cracking once? Cleverness, Wolfe said, is often the disguise of fear. She has intellect enough to steal, not enough to conceal it forever. Phooey, Kramer muttered, half smiling. You'd psychoanalyze a lamppost if it looked guilty. Only if it cast a suspicious shadow, Wolfe replied. That got a short, reluctant chuckle from Kramer. It was progress, our version of diplomacy. He stood, brushing ash from his sleeve. All right, you've got your 24 hours. Don't make me regret it. You won't, Wolfe said. Your office will receive an outline by noon tomorrow. Kramer moved toward the door, muttering something about ulcers and geniuses. I followed to open it for him. Archie, he said quietly, keep your boss from grandstanding. I've got enough trouble explaining him to the DA. I'll try, I said, but explaining Wolfe is like folding a thunderstorm into an envelope. Kramer grunted, almost approvingly, and headed down the steps. When I came back in, Wolfe was already pouring himself a beer, the amber line perfectly measured. Remarkable man, Wolfe said, full of indignation yet governed by decency. Yeah, I said, he left like a man who'd chewed nails but swallowed pride. Wolfe gave a single nod. An apt image. He may yet deserve the truth. And us, I asked. He sipped, then set the glass down with precision. We, Archie, deserve results. Now, summon Saul Pantzer. There is legwork to be done. Sure, I said. And if Kramer comes back breathing fire, then, Wolfe said calmly, you may remind him that smoke is harmless until directed by intelligence. He reached for the bell cord, signaling Fritz for lunch. The sound was final, ritual, a punctuation mark in the morning's quarrel. I went to the phone, smiling to myself. If there was one thing certain about this case, it was that the city wasn't big enough to hold both Wolfe's ego and Kramer's patience for long, and that, as usual, meant I'd be the one running interference, with or without subpoenas. By the time the bell rang that afternoon, Wolfe was knee-deep in orchids and I was knee-deep in boredom. Fritz had gone shopping for trout, and the brownstone felt like a museum with one exhibit, me. When I opened the door, the man on the stoop looked like he'd been poured into his suit and the tailor forgot to leave him room to breathe. Mr. Nero Wolfe, he asked, smoothing his tie the way amateurs smooth lies. Depends, I said. Are you selling encyclopedias or salvation? Neither. I represent the Hudson Trust Company, Mr. Ralston's estate. He produced a card before I could charge him rent for standing there. The card was new, the ink still wet, and the name on it, Gerald T. Niles, Trust Officer, sounded borrowed. Inside, Wolfe was back in his chair, eyes closed, 4 fingers pressed together. When I announced the visitor, one eyelid twitched, a sign of life or annoyance. "Show him in, Archie," he said. Niles entered like a man walking into a confession booth. "Mr. Wolfe, the bank wishes clarification on your inquiry into the Ralston matter. Our directors are concerned. Phooey, Wolfe said without opening his eyes. Banks have no concerns, only interests. Niles blinked. I beg your pardon? You may beg, Wolfe said. But pardon is not yet warranted. Archie. Yeah? Offer the gentleman a chair, one with arms, he will need them. I did, and the man sat, visibly trying not to squirm. I'd seen poker players hold straighter faces while losing their shirts. I fail to understand, he began. Wolfe opened his eyes, cold and steady. You fail in more than understanding, sir. Your diction is rehearsed, your tie is mismatched to your shoes, and your watch chain bears a Cuban peso medallion, unbecoming for a trust officer. Your errand is counterfeit. Why are you here? The man's Adam's apple jumped like a guilty conscience. I don't speak or perspire elsewhere, Wolfe said. I stepped in, leaning against the globe stand. Maybe I can help him find the words. He came to see if we'd found the ledger, boss. He's been sweating over it since noon. Niles shot me a look that could have curdled milk, my second allotted mention for the year. That's absurd. Sure, I said. But you still check the desk twice before sitting down. Looking for what? An envelope? A ledger? He stood abruptly. I see I've wasted my time. Likewise, Wolfe murmured. Our guest moved fast toward the door, but not fast enough to notice when a small matchbook slipped from his coat pocket onto the rug. I waited until the door shut behind him, then bent and scooped it up. The front read The Velvet Room, Midtown's most musical sin. Inside, one match missing. If the Velvet Room sold honesty, I said, it'd go bankrupt before intermission. Wolfe held out his hand. Let me see that. I passed it over. He studied it as if it might blossom into confession. A coincidence, perhaps, or a calling card. I grinned. Or both. Want me to check it out? He frowned. At this hour, you'll find only bartenders and dancers. Wait until 9. Bring Saul Panzer. Sure. You want me to send flowers to the imposter in the meantime? Not yet, Wolfe said. First we confirm which snake owns the skin. By 9:30, the Velvet Room was open and throbbing with trumpet and gin. Red lights, velvet booths, and perfume thick enough to file taxes on. It was the kind of joint that tried to look classy and succeeded at half the price. Saul Panzer was at the bar nursing a soda, his flat cap shadowing eyes that missed nothing. He greeted me with a nod. Place is crawling with familiar strangers. Your man Niles came in 20 minutes ago, but the staff call him Vincent. Vincent? Yeah, Vincent Ross. Supposedly just back from Havana. I did a little phone work, Mrs. Inez Ralston's brother. That took the fizz out of my ginger ale. VR, I said. The telegram initials. Bingo, Saul said. He's sitting in the back booth talking to a redhead who could out-budget temptation. I slipped into the crowd, weaving through waiters and perfume until I had a line of sight. Vincent Ross, our phony banker, had ditched the tight collar for a cream dinner jacket and the kind of grin that suggested he'd borrowed it from a wolf. He was laughing with the redhead, but every few seconds his eyes flicked toward the door. Nerves, guilt, or habit. Take your pick. I waited until Saul wandered past their table, accidentally, and dropped a folded note beside the sugar bowl. Ross unfolded it, read, You left something at Wolfe's. Drop by tomorrow, or we drop by you. The colour drained from his face faster than bourbon from his glass. He whispered something to the girl and bolted for the exit. I followed him as far as the corner. He jumped into a cab and vanished into traffic. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was in the office, dictating notes to himself like a lecturer who didn't trust students. Report, he said without looking up. Our Mr. Niles is actually Vincent Ross, Mrs. Ralston's brother. Havana tan, counterfeit manners. He owns that matchbook and maybe a few murders. Wolfe closed the notebook with a snap. So, the initials in the telegram. Yeah, he warned Blythe, danger from inside. Maybe he thought his sister would thank him for murder prevention instead of embezzlement exposure. Wolfe rubbed his temple. Blood and money are intimate bedfellows, Archie. He came today to learn what we know and to ensure we learn no more. Then he flunked both tests. Wolfe leaned back. Phooey, not entirely. You handled him well. Thanks, I said. I try to keep my improvisations within the law. Your improvisation, he corrected, contributed unexpectedly to reason. You startled him into revelation. That's a flowery way of saying I annoyed him. Which for you is a professional asset, I grinned. Should I keep cultivating it? Within bounds, Wolfe said, and preferably outside my house. Fritz appeared at the doorway, immaculate as ever. Dinner is served, gentlemen. Ah, Wolfe said, respite from deceit. Don't count on it, I told him. Ross isn't done. The way he bolted, I'd bet tomorrow's beer ration he's either on the run or planning a comeback. Wolfe lifted a brow. Then, Archie, we must be prepared to welcome him properly. Saul will continue surveillance. You will draft a précis for Inspector Kramer before noon. I anticipate fireworks. He stood, rarely, deliberately, and moved toward the dining room. I followed, pocketing the matchbook. Fireworks, huh? Maybe we should serve the DA first. Let him light the fuse. Wolfe paused at the doorway, glancing back. Caution, Archie. Fire consumes indiscriminately. Sure, I said, but it sure makes the dark look honest. He grunted, approval maybe, and disappeared toward Fritz's trout. I stayed behind long enough to flip the matchbook open again. The Velvet Room's red logo glowed under the lamp like a warning flare. If glamour was hiding crime, it had just winked at me. If confidence were currency, I'd started that night rich and ended broke, with cordite for small change. The storm had been growling over Manhattan since dusk, and by 9 it was pounding the windows of Vincent Ross's apartment like a collection agency with a grudge. Ross let me in himself. His white dinner jacket was crumpled, his hair slicked the wrong way, and the smell of Havana cigars hung around him like guilt in a humid room. Close the door, Goodwin, he said, pacing. You alone? Just me and the thunder. Saul's downstairs in the car, watching your lobby. Good. I need to talk. His eyes darted to the rain-smeared window, then back to me. You've got to understand. I didn't kill anybody. Inez used me. Join the club, I said. She's got a talent for it. He poured a drink, rum naturally, and tossed it back like it owed him money. I handled the transfers, the profits from her husband's firm, dirty money, cleaned through Havana accounts I set up when I was down there. Inez said it was temporary, just until the market stabilized. And you believed her? I believed the part about money, he said. Not the murder. That wasn't supposed to happen. He slumped into an armchair. The lightning painted his face in short bursts, every flash catching a little more panic. I came back to help her fix it, he said. Instead, she froze me out. I tried to warn Blythe, sent the telegram. She found out, said she'd take care of it. He rubbed his temple. Now she's got all of it offshore, and I've got a target on my back. You're poetic when you're scared, I said, but it doesn't make you innocent. I've got proof, he said, snapping open a desk drawer. The account ledgers, names, transfers, everything. I was going to bring them to Wolfe. Maybe he could... That's when the world exploded. 3 shots cracked through the storm. 1, 2, 3, each louder than the thunder chasing it. The glass shattered near my shoulder. Ross lurched forward, the ledgers scattering like wounded pigeons, and went face first into the rug. For a second, all I heard was rain and the echo of gunfire retreating down the alley. I dropped behind the desk, yanked my .38 and crawled to the window. The fire escape outside was empty except for rainwater streaming off the rails. Saul! I yelled toward the street, but my voice drowned in the storm. Ross didn't move. The rug under him darkened fast. I checked the pulse I already knew wasn't there, then called the brownstone from the hall phone. Wolfe, I said when he answered. Ross is dead. 3 slugs through the window. Looks like Inez's Havana money just bought her a bigger mess. There was a pause that could have curdled milk. Confound it, Archie, Wolfe said finally. Was that man under your protection? He was under my conversation, I said. Protection didn't come up yet. Stay put. The police will arrive shortly. Meaning Kramer's already on the way? Meaning, Wolfe said grimly, I telephoned him myself. Better he find you guilty of recklessness than of concealment. I hung up just as the first siren wailed in the distance. Saul burst in, rain-soaked and furious. I was tailing a sedan parked across the street, he said. Soon as the shots came, it peeled off. Couldn't see who was driving. That's all right, I said. The DA will be happy to pin it on me. I'm already part of the decor. 5 minutes later, Kramer arrived, trench coat dripping, cigar clenched like a weapon. Behind him came Stebbins, grim and carrying a notepad. Well, Goodwin, Kramer said, scanning the room, you've got a talent for being in the wrong place with the right corpse. Yeah, I said. It's a living. He crouched by Ross's body, cigar smoke curling around the light. Close range through the window. Professional job. You see anything? Rain, I said, and my evening plans dying with him. Save the comedy, he growled. You touched anything? Just his pulse. I didn't like what I found. Kramer stood. We'll need your prints anyway. You're on every surface in here. Then the killer's probably jealous, I said. He only left his on the bullets. Phooey, Kramer muttered under his breath. Stebbins, bag that ledger, Kramer said. I initialed the evidence seal. No one was going to claim we'd doctored the arithmetic. Looks like our embezzlement angle just grew teeth. As they worked, the phone rang again. Kramer gestured sharply. Don't answer that. Too late, I said, picking it up. Goodwin here. Archie, Wolfe's voice calm and ironclad. Is Kramer there? Front and centre. Then you will tell him, Wolfe said, that I shall expect his courtesy in acknowledging your cooperation, and remind him he may bluster, but he must not blunder. The evidence must be preserved. Kramer took the phone, glaring. Wolfe, if you're instructing my investigation again, not instructing, Inspector, merely safeguarding competence, you will discover that Ross was silenced to prevent disclosure, not by chance. Kramer exhaled smoke hard enough to fog the receiver. I'll get my proof. In the meantime, keep your assistant away from live suspects. That, sir, Wolfe replied, is my earnest wish as well. When Kramer slammed the receiver down, he gave me a look caught somewhere between fury and fatigue. You tell your boss he's skating on respect, not immunity. I'll pass it on, I said. Maybe embroider it for the office wall. Kramer barked a laugh despite himself and turned to Stebbins. Wrap it up. We'll talk to the DA in the morning. By the time they left, Saul had gathered the ledgers into a soggy bundle. I looked at Ross's body and felt the usual mix. Disgust, regret, and the sour taste of being 1 minute late. Go on ahead, I told Saul. Wolfe will want those dry before they mildew. What about you? I'll ride with Kramer's boys. Keeps my conscience visible. When I finally got back to the brownstone, it was near midnight. The orchids were asleep, but Wolfe wasn't. He sat behind his desk, a single lamp on, a glass of beer untouched. You should have waited for Saul to secure the perimeter, he said without greeting. If I'd waited, Ross would still be dead, I said, maybe with one more bullet for decoration. That is sophistry, he said coldly. You endanger yourself needlessly. Confound it, man. He stopped, jaw tightening. I prefer you alive when wrong. It was as close to affection as Wolfe ever got. I dropped into my chair. Don't worry, I'm hard to kill. Inez'll have to try twice. Wolfe's fingers steepled. And she will. Her brother's death condemns her more eloquently than any indictment. Greed has no borders, Archie, but it always finds home in blood. Nice line, I said. You saving that for the jury? He ignored me, lifting the beer at last. You will type a memorandum of your interview with Ross. I shall read it before retiring. Then, orchids at 9, and no heroics before breakfast. Heroics are off the menu, I said, but I can't promise miracles. Phooey, he muttered. The thunder rumbled again outside, softer now, like applause fading at the end of a bad play. I shut the window, sat down at the typewriter, and began to write while Wolfe sipped in silence. If the night had taught me anything, it was this. Greed travels first class, bullets arrive on time, and Nero Wolfe prefers his assistant breathing. At 8 o'clock sharp, Fritz had cleared the dinner plates and retreated with the solemn dignity of a man leaving the battlefield before the generals drew swords. The office smelled of roast duck and impending doom. Wolfe sat at his desk, immovable as a monument, while I arranged the chairs in what he called equitable geometry, meaning no one closer to him than I was. The bell had rung precisely on the hour, and one by one they filed in. Mrs. Blythe, pale but composed, Saul Panzer, expression unreadable, Inspector Kramer, chewing his cigar like it had personally disappointed him, and finally Inez Ralston, cool, tailored, and fragrant enough to make a florist nervous. Madam, Wolfe said, inclining his head an inch, you are gracious to attend. I'm not sure I had a choice, she said lightly, settling into her chair. Choice, Wolfe said, is a curious illusion, Mrs. Ralston. We believe we have it until logic removes it. Kramer grunted. You said you'd called us here to clarify matters. You planning to clarify them with talk or evidence? Both, Wolfe replied, and perhaps a whiff of perfume. That got a flicker from Inez. Tiny, but there. Wolfe saw it. He could spot a tremor in a statue. "Permit me to summarize," he said, steepling his fingers. Mr. Blythe intended to reveal embezzlement within his firm. The funds had been diverted to accounts in Havana through your brother, Vincent Ross. Her mouth tightened. "You can't prove that." "Madam," Wolfe said softly, "I detest interruption. Proof will arrive when Inspector Kramer produces the sealed packet recovered at Ross's apartment, containing your brother's Havana ledgers, and when I pair it with the Blue Harbor envelope Mr. Goodwin retained. Regrettably, he is no longer able to present them himself." Mrs. Blythe gasped. Inez turned just enough to glance at Kramer, who met her eyes like steel meets stone. "I suppose," Wolfe continued, "you will claim that Ross acted independently, yet the telegram he sent Blythe, signed VR, warned him of danger from within. That within, Mrs. Ralston, was you." "That's absurd," she snapped. "You have nothing but conjecture." "Phooey." Wolfe leaned forward. "Conjecture is a poor man's logic. I have fact. The clerk Kessler died after handling an envelope from you. As our test showed, cyanide residue lay on the inner fold beneath your gardenia talc." Kramer shifted in his seat. "You're telling me she poisoned the envelope herself?" "I am not telling, Inspector," Wolfe said evenly. "I am demonstrating. Mr. Goodwin, the evidence?" I pulled the small envelope from my pocket, sealed in glassine. "Handle with care," I said. "It's as friendly as a rattlesnake in perfume." Wolfe nodded. "You see, Mrs. Ralston, you relied upon trust. Trust in your beauty, your charm, your supposed helplessness. Yet trust, it turns out, smells like gardenias and trouble." Her voice cracked on the next word. "You can't prove—" "Madam," Wolfe's voice boomed like a judge's gavel. "Your brother's death sealed your guilt. He sought redemption. You feared exposure. You lured Kessler with promises, then silenced him when he asked for more money. Mr. Blythe's resolve threatened you. He died for it. The pattern is elegant, too elegant to be coincidence." She looked around wildly, at Kramer, at Mrs. Blythe, at me, but the room had already convicted her. Finally she laughed, brittle and high. "You think you've won because you talk louder, Mr. Wolfe." "Not louder," he said, "merely longer, and with fewer lies." Kramer stood, flicking ash into the tray. "Mrs. Ralston, you'll come with us. Quietly would be best." She rose, composure collapsing like a cheap fan. "You smug, sedentary—" Wolfe raised a hand. "Enough. The performance is concluded." Kramer nodded to Stebbins, who had been waiting outside. The door closed behind them, leaving a vacuum of silence. Mrs. Blythe exhaled shakily. "I suppose justice can be theatrical." Wolfe inclined his head. "Theatre is life condensed to clarity. Tonight, truth required staging." Saul gave a quiet nod and slipped out, efficient as ever. When the door shut again, Wolfe leaned back, exhaled, and reached for his beer. Kramer lingered in the doorway. "All right, Wolfe," he said, voice rough but even. "You were right again. I'll note it before I forget how." Wolfe gestured faintly with his glass. "You are magnanimous, Inspector." Kramer grunted something that might have been a goodbye, and left. When we were alone, Wolfe turned his eyes on me. "Archie, you managed the imposter, the ledgers, and the nightclub admirably. I did not trust the visitor, but I trusted my assistant." "Thanks," I said. "I'll put that on my tombstone." "Do so," Wolfe said, "but not soon." Fritz appeared with the coffee tray, a peace offering from civilization. Wolfe took his cup, sniffed, and closed his eyes. "Archie," he murmured, "the scent of coffee is infinitely preferable to gardenias." "Sure," I said. "Coffee never killed anybody, except maybe a few nerves." He grunted approval. "Confound it, man. Pour yours and sit down. I dislike endings that drag." So I did. Outside, Manhattan buzzed with its usual racket, but inside the brownstone the curtain had fallen, and the audience, just us, sat in satisfied silence. By the time the front door clicked shut behind Inspector Kramer and his crew, the brownstone was quieter than a church after a scandal. Even the orchids upstairs had gone to sleep, and I envied them. The smell of perfume and police ink still clung to the office like the ghost of an unpleasant guest. I opened a window an inch, just enough for the night air to come in and push some of it out. Fritz entered without a sound, balancing a silver tray with 2 glasses of beer so cold the frost was showing its manners. He set one in front of Wolfe, bowed like a diplomat, and left again, silent as a sermon. Wolfe lifted his glass, studied the bubbles rising in the amber, and said, "Beer, Mr. Goodwin, is man's one enduring argument against despair." I took a swallow of mine. "If you're trying to write an ad for the brewery, it needs a jingle." He gave me a look that could have flattened champagne. "I am reflecting, not selling." "Sure," I said, settling back in my chair. "You're reflecting on how you untangled a nest of murderers without leaving your office chair while I risked my hide collecting clues. The usual division of labour." He grunted. "Your hide appears intact, and the risk, as usual, was calculated by you, not by me." "That's right," I said. "And the calculation paid off. We solved the case, cleared the ledger, and probably ruined gardenias for perfume ads." His lips twitched, barely. "An acceptable collateral consequence." The clock ticked toward midnight. The storm that had prowled the city all evening had wandered off, leaving behind wet pavements that reflected the street lamps like polished silver. In that quiet, Wolfe leaned back, eyes half closed, and breathed deeply through his nose, the way he does when he's turning victory into philosophy. "It is a melancholy pattern, Archie," he said at last. "Men build elaborate systems of trust, financial, marital, moral, and then adorn them with deceit as if embellishment could sanctify rot." "Translation," I said. "Money and murder make bad roommates." "Pfui." His eyes opened. "Your vulgarity is deliberate." "Yeah, but it works. Look at Inez Ralston. She built herself an empire out of trust funds and perfume. Too bad both turned out poisonous." He reached for his glass again. "Trust, my boy, is the currency of fools. It circulates quickly and depreciates faster than cash." I tapped the side of my glass. "Maybe, but it's still legal tender in your business. Clients pay us to believe them, even when we know better." "Indeed." His gaze softened, though the words stayed precise. "And sometimes that belief is not misplaced. You, for instance, continue to act as though my intellect requires supplementation by reckless motion." "Only because it does," I said. "If you ever solved a case without me stepping into trouble, I'd have to retire on principle." He sighed, a sound halfway between amusement and resignation. "You are incorrigible." "True, but I'm also solvent." I reached into my pocket and pulled out the envelope Kramer had left on the desk, the remaining half of the Ralston retainer. "She prepaid for innocence and we delivered guilt. You want me to endorse this for expenses or moral satisfaction?" "Both," he said, "though neither is sufficient compensation for the tedium of human folly." I counted the bills twice, because Wolfe liked precision and I liked money, and tucked them into the safe behind the dictionary stand. "All right," I said, closing the panel. "Case closed, conscience cleared, bank account smiling." He didn't answer. He was staring at the empty glass, as though the dregs held secrets the living never did. Then, almost gently, he said, "Archie, what lesson would you extract from this affair?" "Simple," I said. "The next time a woman in yellow knocks, I might just let Fritz answer." That got me the look, the one that's half rebuke, half pride. "Fritz," he said slowly, "is too prudent to answer doors that lead to folly." "And I'm not?" "You," Wolfe said, "are too curious to refuse them." He gestured to the window. The night breeze stirred the curtain, carrying in a faint trace of wet lilac from somewhere down the block, one of those Manhattan smells that pretends to be nature. "Our city," he murmured, "manufactures temptation with greater efficiency than any factory in the world." "Maybe so," I said, "but temptation pays our rent." He gave a single nod, an observation both cynical and true. The clock chimed 12. Wolfe rang the bell cord, and within seconds Fritz appeared again, discreet as a footnote. "Yes, sir." "Lock up," Wolfe said, "then retire. The city is secure in its folly for tonight." "Very good, sir." Fritz vanished as neatly as he'd arrived. I stretched, setting my empty glass beside Wolfe's. "You know, if we ever opened a school for detecting, you could teach deduction, and I could teach running in circles until something shoots at me." He closed his eyes. "An educational balance, I suppose." "Sure," I said. One for the mind, one for the insurance premiums. That earned me another "Pfui," but this one came with a faint smile hidden under his moustache. The last lamp was still burning low, throwing just enough light to make the brass on his desk glimmer. The orchids upstairs would be breathing their midnight air, and the city outside would be resetting its sins for the morning edition. I stood, meaning to call it a night. Wolfe didn't move, but his voice followed me to the door. "Archie?" "Yeah?" "Despite your incorrigible habits, your report on this case was competent." "Coming from you," I said, "that's like a standing ovation." "Do not overstate," he said, but his tone betrayed him. I grinned, turned off the lamp, and left him there with the beer glass gleaming like a medal. Some men toast victory. Wolfe lets it sit quietly until it goes flat, just to make sure it's earned. As I headed upstairs, I heard him mutter one last word into the dark. It might have been Latin, or maybe just the end of a thought. Either way, it sounded a lot like thanks.